say that this election will be a game changer. There was a lot of positivity, Nigerian citizens believing that this will be different from previous elections. So I think that since we are still in the middle of it, it's not too late. We need to, on the part of INEC needs to ensure that they stick to that, to what they had said earlier. It's not too late. It's only 8 states that has been declared. We can ensure that we stick to what has been communicated to the people, because it's about what you communicated. You said to the people that result will be uploaded from the polling unit. Although I'm not surprised this is happening, because if you are following with the way the elections were conducted, people started complaining about the fact that a lot of polling units could not, the returning officer could not, upload their results immediately after the election. So I'm not surprised this is happening, but I would have expected that between Saturday, when most elections were conducted, and now, they should have been able to sort that out, and anything that is being announced today in Abuja should have been also, properly documented and uploaded to the INEC server, which is the high ref.
Prof, again, coming from where Mr. Adegoke has pointed out, there's a perception here. Of course, we start off with the fact that at the very baseline of it, most public institutions have not engendered trust in their activities from the populace. So they've got to do this extra work every time there's a process. In this particular instance, as Mr. Adegoke pointed out, this issue of the uploading and the opportunity to cross-check was to be the unique selling point for, transparency of this election. That hasn't happened. But in terms of looking at it from, the legal perspective, some have already said, they're going to challenge this in court and all of that, whatever is declared, they're going to go after them and say it should be declared null and void. So I want you to look at it from that prism at first. Of course, you can also look at it as simply a citizen. That does the fact that INEC overpromised, I'm using the phrase of one of my guests, and under-delivered on that score, tend to vitiate the process?
From the strictly legal point of view, I think, if I recollect correctly, loading onto the server is not mandatory in terms of the verbiage of the law. It seems to say that can be done. That's a process that can also be done. So if it's not mandatory, that will not constitute the breach of a legal parameter that can vitiate the process. Of course, it does suggest that there is a very low level of trust in INEC, which, of course, you must earn the trust. But for me, the interesting thing, if I want to frame it differently, is that either the law itself was not completely digital, maybe it's in the analog mode, because the essence of loading it digitally would be that you are declaring the results. And so probably we need to make up our mind that should the results be declared when they're loaded, and maybe INEC just comes to the collation center and does something formal. Or do we take the position that you must have a returning officer, which I think is the way the law seems to have been set up, who must declare the results, and then they will be valid. So I think that's where we need to be careful. I think the uploading, yes, was trying to use technology to ensure there's accountability and transparency, and that's very good. But I think then going further, we need to now probably think through the philosophy and perfect the process. I guess the idea is that if you're sure from the polling unit these are the results and you uphold them and they're not going to change, then everybody knows immediately. And there's no hanky-panky at collation centers, no hanky-panky between the polling booth and collation centers. So I think that is what we probably have to now think through going forward. However, if INEC has made certain promises, it's probably also just, what's the word, prudent to follow through from the point of view of governance. Because if you're saying hold us accountable, then I think good good governance practices suggest that you should actually go out and do that. So that's where I think I can reconcile things.
Doesn't that delay the process, which is everybody's just waiting, do this quickly, upload the results. If you have issues, go to the court.
Yeah, okay, so that's where we need to think through. Because if uploading means those are the valid results, then even if you're still going to have returning officer, then we all understand that he will, maybe in his declaring it, that's what gives it validity, or probably it's just a nod to formality. But if it is that they are uploaded and they will always still be challengeable from point of view of law, that they can be challengeable, that would have been okay in a perfect world. But in a situation where there's so much mistrust and people cannot abide by what's it now? Even where results where there's no cheating, people cannot learn to say, "Well, I lost this time. Let me go back." I think then we need to also be a bit more wise in how we manage things, but we also don't want to blow up the country.
Mr. Adegoke, I'm curious to know though. Prof has told us now that this was supposed to enhance transparency. The process, but the manual aspect of it is still a part of the. Is still a part of the process. The manual, this, physically entering by hand the results generated digitally and so on into these sheets, and then the physical transport of them to Abuja, where they are then presented, and then the Inec chairman then accepts them, and before there's a final announcement. This is not optional. This is part of the law, and may have been some kind of compromise position because between those who wanted us to go completely digital and those who wanted us to stay where we were. But it does seem as if rather than resolve issues, it has created, further avenues for controversy. I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, so for me, I think what we need to do is to look at where we are coming from. We didn't just arrive at this point. Ours is a country whereby the outcomes of our elections have always been controversial. Many people believe that every time we go to elections, that the will of the people never mattered, that the powers that be, one way or the other, find a way, to manipulate the outcomes of the election. So that's where we're coming from. We are coming from a place of high, mistrust in the system, in the polity. And we wanted to deepen the process. We wanted to make the process better. We want to create a system of transparency, of openness, where people can trust and can believe that whatever is the outcome of an election is a reflection of the decision of the people of Nigeria. So that's how we got to this point. And that's why the technology element, got into our electoral law. So, yes, it is true that the law is the law. And what the law says, about the manual, announcement of results stays. But we introduced the digital component, the technology component, for the purpose of promoting transparency, for the purpose of building trust in the system. And it's now even more important that at a very cleanly contested election as this, the first election whereby we, in recent time, where we have 3 frontline candidates at least going into the election, you want to demonstrate as much as possible to the people that everybody was given a fair play, especially with all the allegations that have been flying around. On the election day, there were a lot of, allegations that came up that people were, not allowed to vote. There were allegations that came up of Inec officials imputing a different number from what was the actual occurrence at the polling unit. There were allegations around the fact that, in fact, there was even a picture I saw where there was allegation that they were using TPEX to erase the initial number, and they were putting new numbers. I mean, these are all allegations. But then when there are allegations like this, as an institution such as INEC, you want to do your best to ensure that you create confidence in the system. You want to do your best to ensure that you promote transparency. And you have already taken steps through the introduction of the BVAS, through the introduction of the IRF, to promote that transparency. So it is very important, even if you are not required by law to, to abide by what is on the high ref or to use the high ref as the basis of declaring the outcome of the election. It is your integrity that is at stake. It is the integrity of the election that is at stake. And there are also a lot of things that is at stake. It's the peace of the country that is at stake. We don't want a president who is elected legally but is lacking legitimacy because people believe that he got his victory through, illegitimate means.
And that is the more reason why. So jẹ́ pé tó bá step ṣọ́ Nàìjíríà lẹ́nu ìwà arresting mọ́. Ọmọ tí wọ́n bá Kyari ó ní kéèsì pẹ̀lú ọ̀ṣunmọ̀bì lamẹ́ríkà wọ́n bò bọ́bẹ̀ pa ni o wọ́n jò jáde o wọ́n ò gbà kan gbé lọ sí US yẹn o ìgbà tí máa jẹ̀wọ́ ẹ̀ lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ sí kí ló ṣe mú they did nothing wọ́n fi dúdú kan bò wá lójú àwọn tí arrest ẹ̀ why didn't they send him to America? Balọ́mọ ẹni kì í ṣe ìdìbẹ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ ká fi ilẹ̀kẹ̀ sí ọmọ ẹni òbí ọmọ tí wọ́n ṣe ìdìbẹ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ ó yà fi ilẹ̀kẹ̀ sí díẹ̀ ọmọ tí wọ́n ṣe ìdìbẹ́ bẹ̀rẹ̀ o.
That forget about his method, what Dino did at the Coalition Center in Abuja. I may not agree with his method, but I think he was making an important point, which is very, very critical from the polling unit. Then you're going to create mistrust in the system. You're going to create litany of court cases after the election. But even if it's about court cases, we should be fine. At least that's decent enough. But we don't want crisis. We don't want people thinking that, they have been rigged out of the election.
So excuse me, Ladi, I love the choice of words that the gentleman used, Prof. Legal and legitimacy. I'm looking for how they are different. He said, we could have a president that is legally recruited by the people, but lacks legitimacy. What does that mean, speaking from a legal perspective?
Okay.
Or could it be an issue?
You can look at it from a legal and a political perspective. Due process ordinarily should grant legitimacy from strictly legal point of view, and even also from a political point of view. In other words, you followed the due process, crossed the T's and dotted the I's as far as the law is concerned. That normally is what should grant legitimacy from the point of view of law. From the point of view of politics, there are other things that go behind. And perception, public perception, is a very important aspect of this. So if for any reason the public loses trust, or there's some evidence, sometimes there's even some perception. Let's talk about perception. If there's some perception that there has not been fair play, and it may not even be fair play as far as the law is concerned. It may be fair play in terms of what's in political realities not being treated, people's perception of not being treated fairly. Even if the law allows you to do something, it's like this issue of north-south. So yes, the law strictly, that constitution doesn't necessarily say north-south. It does say try and make sure power, and offices and so on are distributed so that people can have a sense of belonging. That is a legal requirement as well, even if it is it's direct. If it's a directive principle.
Okay.
So I think that is the point.
But speaking to the legal that you talked about, okay. So here's what the law says, and which of course I'm sure you are very, very familiar with. Section 50, I think it's subsection 2 of the Electoral Act of 2022. It's very clear. It says where the number of votes cast, and I don't think that is it. I think I'm mixing that up. Says here's is section 50, subsection 2. Says subject to section 63 of this act, voting at an election and transmission of results under this act shall be in accordance with the procedure determined by the Commission. The same thing is repeated in section 60, subsection 5 of the same law that says, and I quote, the presiding officer shall transfer the results, including the total number of accredited voters and the results of the ballot in a manner as prescribed by the Constitution. So, perhaps by way of saying the same thing that you're saying, legally, Inec has not broken any law. However, how do we legislate perception in this regard? Because from what you're saying now, and from what's happened just not too long ago from the National Coalition Center, perception is becoming prominent here.
Yeah, so that is part of public administration or governance. And in the political process, I think public servants must also know that, you also must manage perceptions. You must be fair, you must manage due process, but you must also manage people in order to ensure that you are driving them together. But strictly, this is a matter of accountability and transparency, which has its legal part and it has its non-legal part. And as I have said, it helps us to be more transparent, that as things are happening at the polling center, everybody can see it, so that there is no issue of hanky-panky.